My son snatched the boarding pass out of my hand and pointed at the automatic exit doors with his chin, as if I were a stray dog getting in the way in the hallway. I am Barbara. I am 71 years old. I was a high school history teacher for 4 decades, and this trip was my golden dream. What my son, Robert, did not know was that the credit card that paid for this luxury bears my signature and my resentment. The air conditioning of the international airport chilled me to the bone, but not as much as the coldness in my own son's eyes. We had arrived 3 hours early, just the way I like it, with our bags perfectly weighed and tagged. The hustle and bustle of the terminal was like heavenly music to me. The sound of the suitcase wheels on the polished floor, the announcements over the loudspeakers in languages I barely understand, but that sound like a promise. The smell of expensive coffee and duty-free perfume, everything screamed Paris. Everything screamed that, finally, after years of chalk, green chalkboards, and grading exams, until the early hours of the morning, I was going to see the Eiffel Tower with my own eyes, even if they were slightly clouded by early cataracts. Robert was walking ahead, pushing the cart with our 4 large suitcases. Next to him was Chloe, my daughter-in-law. She was wearing dark sunglasses even though we were indoors, furiously typing on her cell phone without even deigning to look at me. I was walking 1 step behind them, clutching the purse where I kept my passport against my chest as if it were a sacred relic. I felt light, despite my worn-out knees. I had bought myself a new, very elegant camel-colored coat and a pair of comfortable walking shoes, specially chosen to stroll down the Champs-Élysées. "Mom, hurry up, the priority check-in line is moving," Robert had told me minutes earlier. He used that impatient tone he always has when he thinks I am not listening properly. I just smiled. I thought his nervousness was just excitement for the trip. After all, I was the one treating them. The trip of a lifetime, I had told them when I handed them the printed itineraries at our Christmas dinner. Fully paid for. First-class flights, a fancy hotel overlooking the river, dinner, cruises. It all came from my life savings and the sale of a piece of land that my late husband, rest his soul, had saved for our retirement. Since he was no longer here, I wanted to share that abundance with my only son and his wife. We reached the divider line. The airline agent, looking flawless with a silk scarf around her neck, waved us forward. It was right there. Right at that invisible boundary between everyday life and the adventure of my dreams, that my world stopped. Robert turned around abruptly. There was no affection in his eyes. There was only a hard, pragmatic determination that made my blood run cold. He reached out his hand, not to help me, but to demand something. "Give me your ticket, Mom," he said dryly. I, being naive, thought he wanted to help me with the check-in process. I handed it to him with a trembling hand, smiling like a fool. He took it, but instead of placing it next to his and Chloe's on the counter, he shoved it into the inside pocket of his jacket. "What are you doing, son?" I asked, feeling a strange knot forming in my stomach. Robert sighed. It was the sigh of someone having to explain a difficult lesson to a slow child. Chloe stopped looking at her phone. She crossed her arms, looking the other way, chewing gum with her mouth open. "Mom, listen to me very carefully," he said. He lowered his voice so the people in line would not hear, though his tone was as sharp as a scalpel. "You are not going to Paris." The noise of the airport seemed to fade away. I could only hear the ringing of my own blood pressure rising in my ears. "What?" I stammered. "But we are already here. The bags, my coat." "Look at yourself, Mom," he interrupted me, pointing at me from head to toe with sheer contempt. "You can barely walk fast. You are going to get tired in 2 hours. You are going to be a burden. Chloe and I want to enjoy ourselves. This is practically our second honeymoon. We cannot be dragging a wheelchair around or stopping every 10 minutes so you can go to the bathroom." "But I walk just fine, Robert. I do my daily walks in the park." I tried to defend myself, feeling the tears starting to burn my eyes. The humiliation was beginning to creep up my neck. That was when he dropped the sentence that would stay burned into my memory like a branding iron. He placed a hand on my shoulder, not to comfort me, but to gently push me backward, out of the line. Besides, someone has to stay behind. We could not find anyone we trust. So just take a cab and go back to the house. Stay and take care of the cats. Mittens needs his medicine, and you know Shadow does not like dry food. The cats? I repeated in total disbelief. Was he trading my trip to Paris for 2 cats that were not even mine, but theirs? Yes, the cats. Make yourself useful, Mom. You are getting too old for this kind of running around anyway. We will bring you back a keychain or something. Now go. You are making us lose our spot. Chloe let out a nervous little laugh and finally spoke up. Oh, come on, mother-in-law, do not make a scene. This is better for you. You will be nice and relaxed on the couch watching your soap operas. Paris is really dirty and crowded anyway. We are doing you a favor. Robert turned around, giving me his back. He grabbed the suitcases, including mine. That red suitcase where I had packed my best dresses and my travel journal, and he walked up to the counter. He did not even look at me one last time. He simply discarded me. He erased me from the equation as if I were a miscalculation in his perfect plan. I stood there, frozen in the middle of the flow of people, with my purse clutched to my chest and my heart completely shattered. People walked right past me, dodging out of my way. Some looked at me with pity. Just an abandoned old lady standing in line, with teary eyes, dressed to the nines for a trip she was never going to take. I felt such a deep sense of shame that I wished the granite floor would just open up and swallow me whole. How could I have raised such a selfish human being? I, the woman who taught him how to walk, who paid for his college tuition by working overtime, who took care of him when he had that terrible fever that almost took his life. I, Barbara, the respected high school teacher, the woman who used to explain the French Revolution with absolute passion, now reduced to a cat sitter. My legs felt weak. I looked around for a bench, but they were all taken. I leaned against a cold pillar. The image of Robert and Chloe laughing with the flight attendant as they handed over their passports looked blurry through my tears. They were checking in. They were leaving. They were leaving with my money, my lifelong dream, and my dignity. Go home, he had told me. Make yourself useful. That word, useful, echoed in my head. For years, ever since I retired, they had made me feel like my only usefulness was serving them, watching their house when they went out, lending them money for a new car, cooking Sunday dinners so they would not have to spend cash eating out. They had convinced me that I was just an old, slow, and clumsy woman, and out of love and a refusal to face reality, I had believed them. I wiped away my tears with the back of my hand. The rough fabric of my new coat scraped against my skin, and that tiny sting of pain woke me up. I took a deep breath. The air smelled like jet fuel and burnt coffee. I looked toward the exit doors, toward the taxi stand. It would be so easy to just obey, to go home, put on my old robe, feed those cats, and cry in silence while they toasted with champagne on the airplane. That is exactly what the Barbara of yesterday would have done. The self-sacrificing mother, the victim. But then, my right hand, almost on pure instinct, reached inside my purse and touched my leather wallet. My fingers brushed against the cold plastic of my credit cards. I remembered the moment at the travel agency 3 months ago. Robert had wanted to use his card to rack up some reward points, but unfortunately, he had insufficient funds. I had pulled out my card, the black card, the exclusive one the bank offered me for keeping my life savings in their accounts. I will pay for everything, do not worry, I had proudly said that day. Everything, absolutely everything was under my name. The airline tickets, the 5-star hotel reservation, the private tours, even the travel insurance. I looked back toward the check-in counter. Robert and Chloe were no longer there. They had passed the first checkpoint and were heading straight towards security. They looked so confident, like they owned the entire world, walking with that specific arrogance of people who believe their parents are just infinite, disposable resources. They think I am some senile old lady who does not know how the modern world works. They think I am going to go back home and cry. A strange, cold, and metallic calmness suddenly replaced my anguish. It was not hate. It was something much more powerful. It was total clarity. I am a history teacher. I know perfectly well that the greatest empires fall when they underestimate those they consider weak. I know that Marie Antoinette lost her head because she failed to understand that the people were hungry and held power. And my son, Robert, had just made the biggest historical mistake of his entire life, underestimating the very woman who taught him how to read and write. I smoothed out my coat. I fixed my gray hair, which had gotten a little messy in the hustle. I lifted my chin. My knees no longer hurt. In fact, I felt a strength in my legs that I had not felt in 20 years. I did not walk toward the exit. I turned right around, and my footsteps echoed firmly, clicking with absolute authority across the shiny floor. I did not go to the regular check-in line where they had just been. I walked straight up to the main counter, the one with the big, bright sign that reads, Sales and Customer Service, Management. There was a short line. I waited my turn with the exact patience of someone who has proctored 2-hour exams in complete silence. When the young man at the counter called me forward, he did not see me crying. He saw an elegant older woman with a stare made of solid steel. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" the young man asked politely. I pulled out my passport, my official ID, and most importantly, my black credit card. I placed it on the counter with a soft yet definitive thud. The sound was dry and sharp, just like a judge's gavel handing down a sentence. "Good morning, young man," I said. I used my teacher voice. That exact voice I used to silence a classroom of 50 rowdy teenagers. "I need to make an urgent change regarding 3 tickets to Paris that were purchased with this card. I am the account holder and the sole payer of the entire reservation." The young man typed something into his computer and nodded respectfully when he noticed the tier of my credit card. "Of course, Mrs. Barbara. I see the reservation right here. 3 passengers. You, Mr. Robert, and Mrs. Chloe. The flight departs in..." He glanced down at his watch. 45 minutes. They have already checked in. What seems to be the issue? I looked over toward the security hallway where my son and daughter-in-law had just vanished. I pictured their smiling faces, probably taking a selfie to post on social media with the caption, "Off to Paris." "The issue," I said, looking him dead in the eye with a serenity that was almost frightening, "is that there has been a radical change of plans. I need to cancel my companion's tickets immediately." The young man blinked in surprise. "Cancel them? But ma'am, they already checked their luggage. If we cancel right now, their boarding passes will be invalidated at the gate. And..." "Exactly," I interrupted him, flashing a smile that did not quite reach my eyes. "That is exactly what I want. I want that machine to flash red when they try to board that plane. I want a full refund back to my card or a travel credit in my name. I do not care about any cancellation fees, but those 2 tickets need to cease to exist right this very second." The employee looked at me with a mixture of utter confusion and deep respect. "Understood. And what about your ticket, ma'am? Shall we cancel that one as well?" I paused. I thought about the cats. I thought about my empty house. I thought about Paris. And then I thought about the suitcases Chloe had taken away. Where were my clothes going? "Just a moment," I said, as my mind mapped out the final strategy. "Do not cancel mine just yet. First, make sure they do not fly. Erase them from the system. Leave absolutely no trace of their reservation." "Processing it now," he said, typing rapidly on his keyboard. "I will just need your authorization and signature right here." I signed with a perfectly steady hand. Not a single letter trembled. The B in Barbara had never looked so bold and proud. While the ink dried on the receipt, I felt like a 200-pound weight had been lifted right off my shoulders. It was not the weight of the suitcases. It was the heavy weight of years of sheer ingratitude. "All set, ma'am. Robert and Chloe's tickets are officially canceled. The system has just sent an alert straight to the boarding gate. When they scan their barcodes, they will be denied access due to a cancellation by the payment holder. Perfect, I whispered. Is there anything else? Actually, yes, I said, checking my watch. Boarding started in 30 minutes. That was plenty of time. Tell me, young man, what exactly happens to the luggage when a passenger does not fly due to a gate cancellation? Due to security regulations, ma'am, the luggage must be removed from the aircraft. A suitcase cannot travel without its owner. They will have to identify it down on the tarmac or at the baggage claim area. It will delay the flight a little bit, but it is standard protocol. A dark sense of satisfaction rushed through my entire body. Not only were they not going to Paris, but they were also going to suffer the utter embarrassment of being pulled off the flight, having to hunt down their bags and trying to explain why the useless old lady had the absolute power to ground them. Very well, I said, putting my credit card away safely. Thank you for your efficiency. I turned around. I did not head outside to the taxi stand. I walked straight toward the security checkpoint. I had my passport and my digital boarding pass right on my smartphone. Luckily, Robert had not taken that from me, assuming that old ladies do not understand technology. Well, this old lady understood more than enough. I was not going back home to babysit their cats. I was heading straight to the boarding gate. Maybe not to get on the plane since they had taken all my clothes, but I was definitely going to watch the show. I wanted to witness the exact moment reality smacked them right across the face. I wanted to see the look on Robert's face when the scanner made that nasty error sound. I walked right through the security lanes with my head held high. For the first time in years, I was not the mother, the grandmother, or the widow. I was Barbara, the owner of the credit card, the master of my own destiny, and I was about to teach them the most painful history lesson of their entire lives. I walked through the metal detector with my heart pounding in my throat. It was not out of fear, but rather a mix of pure adrenaline and that strange clarity that sheer anger gives you when you have absolutely nothing left to lose. The security officer, a stocky young guy with a bored expression, did not even look at me twice. To him, and to the rest of the world, I was just a harmless elderly woman in a camel-colored coat, clutching her purse to her chest. "Go ahead, ma'am, watch your step," he told me, giving me a half-hearted wave of his hand. "Ma'am." Being called a motherly title used to fill me with pride. Now it just tasted like bitter ash in my mouth. I thanked him with a slight nod and grabbed my gray plastic bin. My belongings were few. Just my cell phone, my cheap wristwatch, and the hidden travel money belt I wore tucked securely under my blouse. The same one Robert had mocked, calling it a paranoid old lady accessory. What wonderful irony. If he had only known what I was carrying in there, he probably would have patted me down himself before throwing me away like an old piece of trash. I walked toward the duty-free shopping area. The glare from the liquor bottles and shelves of expensive perfumes made me a little dizzy. I looked for a quiet corner near a massive window where you could see the airplanes parked at the gates, looking like giant metal birds waiting to be fed. I sat down on a stiff metal chair and pulled out my phone. My hands, covered in age spots and protruding veins, moved with a speed that would have absolutely shocked my daughter-in-law, Chloe. She and Robert always assumed that technology and I were mortal enemies. "Oh, mother-in-law, put that down. You are going to mess up the TV settings," Chloe would tell me every time I grabbed the remote control. "Mom, do not touch my computer. You will not understand it," Robert would repeat. What they did not know was that, ever since I became a widow, I had signed up for free tech classes at the local public library. I learned how to use online banking, download travel apps, and manage email accounts better than a lot of my former high school students. I unlocked the screen. The brightness was turned all the way up, and the font size was extra large, sure. My eyesight might be fading, but my brain was still perfectly sharp. I opened my banking app. There was the confirmation right on the screen. Refund in progress for airline cancellation. The dollar amount was high. Painfully high. It was my retirement money. the product of all my sacrifices, marching right back into my bank account like a loyal soldier coming home. Next, I opened the airline app. There were the names: passenger, Barbara, status, confirmed, passenger, Robert, status, canceled, passenger, Chloe, status, canceled. Seeing those bright red letters next to their names sent an electric shock straight down the back of my neck. It was not revenge, I kept repeating to myself as I stared at the screen. It was historical justice. As a teacher, I always taught my students that every action has a reaction, and that tyrants usually fall because of their own blind arrogance. Robert and Chloe had been acting like domestic dictators, and now the invisible guillotine of reality was about to drop right on their necks. But then, a sudden sliver of doubt crossed my mind. What happens now? They had my large suitcase. They had my nice dresses, my comfortable walking shoes, and my arthritis creams. I was sitting there with nothing but the clothes on my back and my handbag. I touched my waist, feeling the bulge of the travel belt hidden under my shirt. I was carrying something they had completely forgotten about in their rush to get rid of me: the cash. $3,000 in cash that I had exchanged at the bank 2 weeks ago. I had decided to carry it on me, strapped to my body the old-fashioned way just in case. Plus, I had all my essential daily medications right in my purse. I never travel without them in my carry-on. It was a strict habit my late husband had taught me. I have the money, I have my passport, my blood pressure is under control. I whispered quietly to myself. I stood up and walked over to the departure monitors. Flight 452 to Paris, Gate 18, boarding in 20 minutes. As I walked down the seemingly endless terminal hallway, I caught my reflection in the window of a sunglass store. I saw a small woman with short white hair, walking with absolute determination. Over the last 5 years, ever since I moved in with them so I would not be lonely, that woman in the reflection had been shrinking. I had become the ghost of the house, the one who quietly washes the dishes while they binge-watch TV shows, the one who hands over her credit card and never asks when she will get paid back. I remembered just last week, Robert came home screaming because he could not find his blue dress shirt. I had washed it, ironed it perfectly, and hung it right in his closet, but he just could not see it. "You are a disaster, Mom. You cannot even organize a simple bedroom anymore," he had yelled at me. I just lowered my head and apologized. I apologized for washing his clothes. At what exact moment did Barbara, the fierce woman who organized teachers' union strikes back in the 80s, turn into this frightened little mouse? The airport was packed with people, families running to their gates, businessmen talking loudly on their phones, young couples kissing. Nobody noticed me. To them, I was just part of the terminal furniture, and it was right there that I realized my true superpower: invisibility. Robert and Chloe would not be looking for me. They would be absolutely certain that I was already in the back of a cab, crying all the way home to feed their cats. They would never expect me to be standing 50 yards away from their boarding gate, watching their every move. Their pure arrogance was my perfect camouflage. They believe I am weak, slow, and totally dependent on them. They truly think I am nothing without them. I arrived at the waiting area for Gate 18. I adjusted my glasses and found a very strategic seat, hidden right behind a wide pillar covered in an ad for some international bank. From there, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the boarding desk and the line that was starting to form. And there they were. I spotted them near the floor-to-ceiling windows taking pictures. Chloe was doing those ridiculous duck face poses, popping her back leg up while Robert crouched down, trying to find the best angle with his phone. They looked so happy. They looked triumphant. They were laughing. They were probably joking about how incredibly easy it was to ditch the old lady. "You will see how much fun we are going to have without her," I imagined Chloe saying. "With all the money we will save on her meals, we can go shopping at the fancy boutiques." I felt a sharp stab of emotional pain. I will not deny it. He is my son. He is the little boy I rocked to sleep, the one whose scraped knees I used to bandage, the one I taught to respect his elders. Where did I go wrong? Was it giving him too much love? Was it giving him everything I never had growing up? Maybe my biggest mistake was becoming his permanent safety net, never letting him learn how to hit rock bottom and pick himself back up. But the pain quickly gave way to the icy logic of a master strategist. I checked my watch. Boarding would begin in exactly 10 minutes. I pulled a small notepad out of my purse. I carry it with me everywhere. It is an old teacher habit to write everything down. I opened it to a fresh page and jotted down today's date. Then I wrote the title, Operation Paris, the Final Exam. I began evaluating my current resources with a cold, analytical mind. Item 1, the ticket. I have a confirmed seat in business class, row 2A. They had 2C and 2D. Those seats were now completely vacant in the system. Item 2, the luggage. My red suitcase was checked under Robert's name. When he was flagged at the gate, the ground crew would have to pull all the bags linked to his reservation. That meant my suitcase was coming off the plane too. There was absolutely no way I could get it back today without canceling my own flight. Item 3, the destination. Paris. A place I only know from reading history books, but a city I have walked through 1,000 times in my own imagination. Could I really go by myself? At 71 years old, with no change of clothes, flying to a foreign country alone? I looked down at my orthopedic shoes. They were very comfortable. I looked at my coat. It was warm. I touched the money strapped to my waist. I had plenty of cash. Why not? I whispered. The idea was equally terrifying and completely intoxicating. I had always convinced myself that I needed Robert in order to travel. Mom, you do not speak French. Mom, you are going to get lost on the subway. They had successfully convinced me of my own uselessness. But thinking about it now, who organized out-of-state field trips for 200 high school students? I did. Who managed the entire household budget when my husband got sick? I did. Who taught herself how to use a smartphone without any help? I did. The gate agent's voice interrupted my train of thought over the loudspeakers. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We will now begin the boarding process for Flight 452 with service to Paris Charles de Gaulle. We invite all our first class, business class, and platinum members to approach the gate. The moment had finally arrived. I watched Robert and Chloe jump out of their seats as if they had springs in their shoes. They grabbed their expensive designer carry-on bags, gifts I had bought them in my past life, and headed straight for the priority boarding lane with that attitude that hurt me so much to see. Chloe flipped her hair over her shoulder and Robert pulled the boarding passes out of his pocket. The exact same pieces of paper he had snatched from my hands just minutes ago. My heart began to pound heavily in my chest like a loud war drum. I stood up from my seat behind the column, but I did not step forward. I stayed right there, completely motionless, like an audience member in the front row of a theater. They moved forward. There was one couple in front of them in line. The agent scanned the couple's barcodes. I saw the green light flash. They walked right through the jet bridge. Now, it was my son's turn. I watched him flash his most charming smile at the gate agent. It was the smile he only uses when he wants to get something for free. He handed her the 2 passes. Chloe was standing right next to him, staring at her phone, looking incredibly bored. She was just waiting to get inside the plane so she could take a selfie in her spacious seat, holding a glass of champagne. The agent took Robert's boarding pass and placed it under the laser scanner. Time seemed to freeze. In my mind, I could hear the absolute silence right before a massive thunderstorm. I knew exactly what was about to happen, but actually watching it play out in real time, that was something else entirely. The scanner emitted a deep, harsh sound, a long, unpleasant error buzz that was completely different from the cheerful beep the previous passengers got. A bright red light flashed on the small screen facing the agent. Robert frowned, looking visibly confused. It must be a printing error. he told the girl. His tone had a hint of annoyance, acting as if she had done something wrong. Scan it again. The gate agent, maintaining her strict professional composure, passed the barcode under the laser a second time. Buzz. Red light again. I watched Robert's entire posture shift. His shoulders instantly tensed up. Chloe finally looked up from her screen and pulled down her sunglasses. "What is going on, Rob?" she asked, loud enough for me to hear it clearly from my hiding spot. "Nothing. This stupid machine is broken," he replied bluntly. Then he handed Chloe's ticket to the agent. "Try this one." The girl scanned it. Buzz. Red light. The agent immediately started typing on her keyboard. Her facial expression shifted from polite customer service to serious airline administration. "Sir, these boarding passes are invalid. Your reservation has been completely canceled." "What?" Robert shouted. Several heads in the priority line immediately turned around to stare. "That is totally impossible. We literally just checked in an hour ago. Our bags are already under the plane." "I apologize, sir, but it says it right here on my screen. This is a full cancellation. It was requested in person by the primary payment holder approximately 20 minutes ago." I watched all the color drain completely out of my son's face. He turned as pale as a sheet of white paper. Chloe let out a dramatic, muffled gasp. "The payment holder?" Robert stammered. "But the credit card." And right then, I watched the realization hit him. It was like watching a light bulb turn on in extreme slow motion. His eyes went wide with sheer panic. He snapped his head around, looking back toward the main terminal concourse, scanning the large crowd frantically. He was looking for the useless old lady. He was looking for the mother he had just ordered to go home and babysit his cats. I took one single step to the side, stepping out from the safety of the wide pillar. I planted my feet firmly, shoulder-width apart. My camel coat looked absolutely flawless, and I held my handbag with ironclad strength. Our eyes locked from about 60 feet away. He saw me, and for the very first time in years, he did not see a burdensome old lady. He saw Barbara. He saw the contained fury, the deeply wounded dignity, and the absolute unquestionable power I held over his destiny at that very moment. His mouth opened to say something, maybe the word mom, but no sound came out. Chloe followed his terrified gaze and spotted me, too. Her designer handbag literally slipped out of her fingers and crashed onto the carpet. I did not smile. I did not make any obscene gestures. I simply raised my right hand, holding up my smartphone. The screen was shining brightly, displaying the QR code for my valid first-class boarding pass. I gave him a very slow, deliberate wave with my fingers, a farewell wave. The gate agent was already on her radio calling for airport security or a manager. I was not sure which, but total chaos was starting to brew all around them. The people waiting in line were starting to complain loudly. "Sir, you need to step aside right now. You are holding up the boarding process," the agent said with a stern voice. "No, wait! That is my mother right there. She needs to fix this," Robert yelled. He pointed at me with a visibly shaking finger. He started storming toward me, completely ignoring the airline staff's direct orders. "Security!" the agent yelled. I did not take a single step back. I felt an icy, glacial calm wash over my body. I was no longer the victim. I was the judge. And the final sentence had just been served. In that exact instant, I realized something truly fundamental. For years, I truly believed my life was over the day I retired. I thought my personal history was already fully written, and that my only remaining role was to be a small epilogue in my son's life story. How incredibly wrong I was. My story, my real, actual story, was just beginning right here in Terminal 2 of the International Airport. Robert was marching straight toward me. His face was completely distorted by a mix of blind rage and sheer panic. But I was not scared at all. I held the credit card. I held the moral high ground. And above all else, I held a will of solid steel that I thought I had lost somewhere between cooking recipes and routine doctor appointments. I took a deep breath. I filled my lungs with that recycled airport air, which suddenly felt like the purest, freshest breeze of total freedom. I was fully ready for my next move. The entire game had shifted, and the black chess pieces had just declared checkmate. I did not back up a single inch when Robert lunged toward me. During my 4 decades in the classroom, I learned one vital lesson. When a troubled student tries to intimidate you with their physical size or a loud voice, the absolute worst thing you can do is show them fear. Fear has a scent, and predators, even if they are your own flesh and blood, feed on it. I stood completely still. My back was perfectly straight, and my chin was held high. I held my purse with both hands right at waist level. It was that exact posture of infinite patience I used to strike while waiting for a noisy classroom to settle down. "Mom!" Robert roared. He stopped about 3 feet away from me, but only because an airport security officer, a very tall man in a dark blue uniform, had quickly stepped right in his path. "What did you do? Go tell them it is a mistake. Tell them you are confused." His voice echoed violently across the entire waiting area, causing several passengers to put down their magazines and phones to watch the live entertainment. I felt dozens of eyes burning into the back of my neck, but this time, it was not the burning sting of shame I felt back at the check-in line, because this time, the embarrassment was not mine to bear. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to lower your voice and keep your distance," the security officer said. His tone was heavily authoritative as he placed a firm hand flat against my son's chest. Robert swatted his hands in the air out of sheer desperation. His face was bright red and glistening with sweat. Chloe came running up right behind him. Her mascara was slightly smudged under her eyes, and she was breathing heavily, dragging her feet in those expensive designer heels that were clearly not made for sprinting through an airport concourse. "She is my mother!" he screamed. He pointed at me again like I was some piece of lost luggage. "She is an elderly woman. She does not know what she is doing. She probably hit cancel by accident on her cell phone. She does not understand modern technology. She needs to fix this right now." He glared at me with those wild, bulging eyes. He fully expected me to nod along, to lower my head in submission and say, "Yes, my sweet boy, I'm so sorry. I am just a foolish old lady. Let me fix it." He expected me to pull out my card, pay whatever penalty fees they demanded, and humiliate myself publicly just to save his precious vacation. But I did not say a single word. I just looked at him. I stared at him with an eerie calmness that seemed to unnerve him far more than any screaming ever could. I maintained total silence, that heavy, incredibly dense silence I used when a student failed to bring in their homework. I let his yelling echo and fade out into the room. I let his complete lack of emotional control contrast heavily with my poised composure. "Mom, say something," he insisted. He lowered his voice just a bit when he realized the security guard was not budging an inch. "Tell them to reactivate the boarding passes. We are going to miss the plane." Chloe grabbed onto Robert's arm, gasping for air. "Mother-in-law, please, my suitcases, my clothes. This is not funny anymore. If this is a sick joke about the cats, we get it. We are sorry. Just fix it." And there it was, the explicit mention of the cats. The verbal confirmation that they knew exactly why this was happening, even if they were desperately trying to deny it in front of airport security. I took one slow step forward. I moved with the grace of a woman walking down the aisle or stepping up to a podium. I looked the security guard right in the eyes and gave him a gentle smile. It was a harmless grandmotherly smile, but a very sharp and lucid one. "Officer," I said. My voice was incredibly clear and calm, perfectly audible to the crowd of nosy onlookers surrounding us. "This man is indeed my son. I can confirm that. But I am afraid the only person who is confused around here is him." Robert opened his mouth, absolutely outraged. "What are you talking about? You canceled?" he asked. "The gate agent said it was you." "That is exactly right," I replied, turning my head to look directly at him. My eyes met his, and I saw the exact moment when doubt began to fracture his arrogance. "I canceled the tickets, Robert. It was not a typo. It was not the senile dementia you love to imply that I have. It was an executive decision." The silence that followed my words was absolutely delicious. You could clearly hear the hum of the airport air conditioning. Chloe let go of Robert's arm and quickly covered her mouth with her hand. "But why?" he stammered, his voice reduced to a childish, breathy whisper. "You already paid for everything. The money is already spent." "Money can always be recovered, son," I said softly. "Dignity cannot." I took one step closer, just close enough for the sharp smell of his expensive cologne to hit my nose, the exact same cologne he bought with the money I lent him last month. "You told me to go home. You told me to make myself useful. You told me to stay behind and take care of the cats because I was a burden for your precious second honeymoon. Do you remember saying that?" Robert looked around nervously, finally noticing that dozens of people were listening. His face went from bright red to a sickly pale. The narrative of the crazy, confused mother was crumbling right in front of him. Now he was the villain of the story, and the entire audience knew it. "Mom, that was just a figure of speech," he tried to justify, lowering his voice and desperately trying to regain some control over the situation. "We were just stressed out. You cannot do this to us right here. The bags are already loaded onto the plane. Chloe has her important medication packed in her suitcase." "That is a bold-faced lie," I cut in sharply. "Chloe has her expensive makeup palettes packed in her suitcase. Her gummy vitamins are sitting right there in her handbag. I am the one who takes daily blood pressure medication, and fortunately, I have it right here with me." I pulled out my cell phone. The screen glowed brightly with a new notification from the airline app. "Boarding in progress." "Look, Robert," I said, showing him the screen, but not letting him reach out to touch it. "I am not confused. I know exactly what I did. I walked straight into the management office. I identified myself as the primary holder of the platinum card that has funded all of your extravagant whims for the last 10 years, and I formally revoked my generosity." "But you cannot leave us here," Chloe shrieked, completely losing whatever composure she had left. "What are we going to do? Everything is booked under your name." "Exactly," I nodded, savoring the taste of every single syllable. "The luxury hotel, the private tours, the riverboat cruise, everything is under my name. And as the paying account holder, I have the absolute right to decide who accompanies me. And I have decided that I vastly prefer solitude over the company of two people who treat me like an old, broken piece of furniture." The security guard coughed discreetly into his fist, hiding a very obvious smile. Robert ran his hands fiercely through his hair in total desperation. He looked exactly like a spoiled child who just had a stolen toy snatched out of his hands. "Mom, please." His tone shifted rapidly. It was now pleading. It was that sweet, honeyed voice he used when he needed money for a down payment on a new car. "Do not hold a grudge. We are so sorry, okay? We apologize. It was incredibly stupid of us. We were just nervous about the big trip. But please do not do this to us. You are going to make us lose thousands of dollars." "No, Robert," I corrected him ruthlessly. "I am going to lose thousands of dollars. You two are not going to lose a single dime, because you did not contribute a single dime to this trip. The only thing you are going to lose is the opportunity to take pictures, to show off a lavish lifestyle you cannot even afford." The gate agent at the boarding counter picked up her microphone. "Final boarding call for Flight 452 to Paris. All remaining passengers, please board at this time." The sound of the announcement acted like a gunshot. Robert tried to take a desperate step toward the counter, completely ignoring me, acting as if he could magically convince the airline to ignore the actual cardholder. "Miss, he yelled toward the flight attendant. "This is just a giant family misunderstanding. Just let us through and we will sort it all out when we land in Paris." The agent shook her head. She did not even bother to look up at him, keeping her eyes glued to her computer screen. "Sir, if you do not have a valid boarding pass, you cannot go through those doors, and I am going to have to ask you to step away from the boarding area right now, or I will be forced to call airport police. You are blocking the flow of passengers." Robert turned back to me one last time. His eyes were actually welling up with tears, but not out of genuine sadness. It was pure, helpless frustration. "Mom, are you really going to do this to us? Are you seriously going to go home and leave us stranded here?" That was exactly when I dropped the final piece of my grand strategy, the one they never even saw coming. I adjusted the collar of my brand new coat. I slung my heavy purse over my shoulder with absolute determination. "Who said I am going home?" I asked, raising one eyebrow. Robert and Chloe completely froze in their tracks. "What?" they asked in unison. "I have a perfectly valid ticket, Robert," I said, pointing toward the boarding gate with an elegant flick of my hand. "Row 2, seat A, window seat." I always wanted to look out at the clouds from above without someone tapping my shoulder, asking me to switch places because the sun was in their eyes. Chloe's jaw practically dropped to the carpeted floor. Robert looked as if he had just taken a physical punch straight to the stomach. You are going by yourself," he whispered in absolute disbelief. "But you do not even know how to order a cab. You are going to die all alone over there. You do not even speak French." I smiled. It was a genuine smile. A smile completely full of a bright confidence that had been asleep under thick layers of maternal submission for decades. "I have translation apps, Robert, and I have something much more important than that. I have peace. Besides, I am a history teacher. Paris has been living inside the books I have read my entire life. I know that city better than you ever could. You only wanted to go there to buy designer clothes." I turned on my heel. I turned my back to them. That same back that had hunched over so many times to carry their endless problems was now standing tall, straight, and incredibly firm. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, turning my head just slightly over my shoulder, just enough so they could hear me loud and clear. "About the cats." I watched them instantly strain their ears. They were probably hoping I would toss them my house keys or offer some final instruction to save them from this nightmare. "I really hope you put enough dry food in the automatic dispensers," I said coldly, "because you are going to have plenty of free time to take care of them yourselves. You are lucky. The cab ride back home will be much cheaper than a flight to Paris." I started walking toward the flight attendant. My comfortable walking shoes echoed rhythmically across the blue carpet of the boarding area. I felt a sudden lightness in my body that I had not felt since I was 20 years old. "Mom! Mom! You cannot do this!" I heard Robert screaming behind my back, but his shouts sounded incredibly distant, as if they were echoing in from another dimension, from a past life that simply no longer belonged to me. "My suitcases, Barbara, my clothes!" Chloe shrieked. I reached the counter. The agent looked right up at me. She had witnessed the entire scene unfold. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of utter surprise and, I dare say, sheer admiration. "Good afternoon, ma'am," she said. Her tone was much warmer and far more human than standard airline protocol. "Your boarding pass, please." I handed her my smartphone. My hands were not shaking at all. "Here you go, miss. Just me, Barbara." The scanner beeped cheerfully. A beautiful, bright green light lit up on the console. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Barbara. Have a truly excellent flight." I crossed the threshold and stepped into the long tunnel of the jet bridge. The air instantly shifted. It smelled like pure adventure, freshly brewed coffee, and absolute freedom. I did not look back. I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. Two incredibly selfish adults dealing with angry airport police, trying to retrieve giant suitcases that were likely already being unloaded onto the rainy tarmac, and finally facing the harsh reality that their personal bank had just closed its doors forever. As I walked down the boarding tunnel, I felt a single tear roll down my cheek. I did not wipe it away. It was a tear of mourning for the son I always thought I had, but it was also the fresh water nourishing the seed of the woman who was finally being reborn. I stepped onto the plane. The business class cabin was a total oasis of calm and luxury. A flight attendant greeted me with a tall glass of champagne before I even found my seat. "May I take your coat for you, ma'am?" "Yes, thank you very much," I replied, handing it to her. I sat down in seat 2A. The chair was wide, incredibly soft, and made of genuine leather. I looked out the oval window. Down below, on the tarmac, I could see the little baggage carts zooming by. I imagined Robert and Chloe up there in the terminal, standing behind the thick glass, watching my plane prepare to leave. I had executed my entire plan in complete silence, without a single act of violence, using the exact same weapons they had used against me for years. Underestimation. They truly believed I was not capable of pulling the trigger. They believed that a mother's love was a permanent life sentence of absolute servitude. I took a sip of the cold champagne. The bubbles tickled my nose. "Here is to you, Mittens and Shadow," I whispered quietly, raising my glass toward the window. "Take good care of my son. He is going to need a lot of comfort when he finally sees his own credit card statements." The airplane began to move. The deep roar of the jet engines vibrated heavily in my chest, syncing perfectly with the fast beating of my heart. Paris was waiting for me, and for the very first time in my entire life, I was not the one staying behind, waving a sad little handkerchief. I was the one flying away. The roar of the engines grew louder. It was a powerful vibration that traveled from the floor of the plane straight up to my tired feet. It felt as if the massive machine itself was injecting me with the raw strength I had lacked for so many years. As the plane angled up steeply toward the sky, leaving gravity and pure ingratitude far behind, I looked out the window. Down below, the massive airport turned into a harmless little scale model of concrete and glowing lights. I pictured Robert and Chloe down there, tiny, insignificant, fighting with the ground crew, desperately searching for their luggage that had been expelled like unwanted outcasts onto the runway. The seatbelt sign turned off with a soft ding. It was the beautiful sound of my ultimate liberation. "Would you care for some more champagne, Mrs. Barbara?" the flight attendant asked. She was a young French woman with a warm smile that carried absolutely zero condescension. "Yes, please," I replied. I settled deeper into a seat that was far more comfortable than my own living room sofa. "And please bring me the dinner menu if you would be so kind. I have a hunger that has been building up for decades." While the plane leveled off high above the clouds, which looked like a vast field of soft cotton illuminated by the setting sun, I decided to do something that would have previously triggered a massive panic attack. I connected my smartphone to the in-flight Wi-Fi network. I knew the service cost an extra $20. Yesterday, I would have considered that a complete waste of money. Today, it felt like a wonderful investment in pure entertainment. The moment the network fully connected, my phone started vibrating violently, as if it were having a seizure. The notifications cascaded in, one after another, stacking up on the screen with a truly palpable desperation. 10 missed calls from Robert, 5 missed calls from Chloe, 15 panicked text messages. I opened Robert's chat with extreme clinical calmness, exactly like a teacher reviewing a failing exam to see exactly where the student went wrong. "Mom, this is complete insanity. Come back. They pulled us out of line like common criminals. Everyone is staring at us. Chloe is crying in the bathroom. She says you ruined her entire life. Where are you? The gate agent says the plane already closed its doors. Tell them to stop the plane." I read every single message while slowly sipping my fizzy drink. I felt zero guilt, not even a single drop. What I felt was a strange, almost anthropological fascination. Did they seriously believe I had the sheer power to stop a commercial airliner mid-takeoff just because they were feeling uncomfortable? Was their egocentrism really so massive that they thought aviation laws would simply bend to their childish tantrums? I typed out a reply, but then I quickly deleted it. No, replying would mean playing their game. Replying would give them the exact attention they were demanding, and from this day forward, my attention was a highly exclusive resource, reserved solely for myself. Instead of texting back, I opened my banking app. Right there was my true power, the heavy scepter and crown of this newly exiled queen. I looked at my available balance, heavily padded by the immediate refund of their 2 first-class tickets. It was a small fortune. Money I had saved over the years by depriving myself of morning coffees, new clothes, and taxi rides. Money that was about to be squandered on designer handbags for Chloe, and expensive dinners where Robert would not even let me speak. I navigated to the authorized users section of my account. There they were. Card 1, Robert. Miscellaneous expenses. Card 2, Chloe. Emergencies. I let out a dry, raspy laugh that made the passenger across the aisle look over at me with sheer curiosity. Chloe's last major medical emergency had been a pair of Italian leather shoes on clearance. My finger hovered right over the digital button that read, "Block card, temporarily." I stared at it for a second. I thought back to when Robert was just a little boy, and I used to hand him my coin purse so he could buy ice cream from the truck. I thought about exactly how that sweet trust had morphed into pure financial abuse. I pressed the button. Confirm block. Yes. I did the exact same thing for Chloe's card. Confirm block. Yes. The screen immediately displayed a bright red padlock icon right next to their names. It was far more satisfying than any history lesson I had ever taught on the epic fall of the Roman Empire. I had just cut off the supply lines. The great aqueduct of Rome had officially run dry. 5 minutes later, a text message arrived confirming my exact theory. "Mom, we tried to order an extra-large rideshare for all these bags, and the card was declined. It says insufficient funds or card blocked. Unblock it right now. We are standing on the curb outside Terminal 2, and it is about to start raining." I smiled broadly. Poetic justice is sometimes heavily delayed, but when it finally arrives, it is absolutely relentless. They had no cash on them. They never carried physical cash because they thought that was something only old people did, and their personal credit cards were likely maxed out or completely canceled for missed payments, which was exactly why they relied so heavily on mine. They were totally stranded, standing out in the cold with 4 giant suitcases, 2 designer handbags, no car, no money, and no live-in maid to magically fix their lives. I looked out the airplane window. The sky was rapidly darkening, painting itself in beautiful shades of deep purple and bright orange. I pictured Chloe in her tall stilettos, desperately trying to drag that massive red suitcase, my suitcase, filled with my clothes, through the cold city drizzle. They would have to call a friend and beg for a ride, or even worse, they would have to take public transportation. They were going to have to carry their own heavy burdens. They were going to have to actually feel the crushing weight of reality in their own muscles. Muscles that had completely atrophied thanks to the endless comfort I had happily provided them for years. The flight attendant returned, laying out a crisp white linen tablecloth and real silver cutlery on my tray. "For dinner this evening, ma'am, we are serving duck confit with a wild berry reduction, or lobster thermidor." "The lobster," I replied without a single second of hesitation. "And please bring me a glass of ice water. I need to take my blood pressure medication. I want to be in absolutely perfect condition when we land." "Excellent choice, ma'am." While I waited for my fancy meal, an intrusive thought suddenly ambushed me. My clothes. Everything I had packed with so much love and care was currently sitting in the baggage claim of that local airport, probably being grudgingly retrieved by Robert as we spoke. I was heading to Paris with nothing but the clothes on my back: a pair of dress slacks, a silk blouse, my camel coat, and my orthopedic walking shoes. I stared down at my empty hands. I did not even have pajamas. I did not have a toothbrush. I did not have my elegant dresses for the dinner cruises. For just one terrifying second, the deep fear of the helpless old lady tried to rear its ugly head again. What am I going to do? But then I remembered the heavy black credit card sitting in my purse. I remembered the $3,000 tucked safely away in my travel belt. I remembered that I was flying straight toward the fashion capital of the entire world. I have no clothes, I murmured softly to myself, and then a tiny nervous giggle escaped my lips, quickly transforming into a smooth, bubbling laugh. I have no old lady clothes. That was exactly it. It was not a tragedy at all. It was a golden opportunity. All those garments packed in that heavy suitcase were the wardrobe of a respectable, invisible elderly woman. Clothes carefully chosen so I would not embarrass Robert in public. Neutral, boring colors designed to blend right into the background. Now I could buy whatever I pleased. I could walk into a high-end boutique on the Champs-Élysées and buy myself a bright red dress or an electric blue silk scarf. I could dress exactly like the woman I wanted to be, rather than the fading mother they desperately wanted me to remain. The man sitting in seat 2D just across the aisle was quietly watching me. He was a handsome gentleman in his late 60s, with perfectly styled silver hair, reading a very thick architecture book. "Please excuse my intrusion," he said, in a deep, highly educated voice. "But you look incredibly happy. It is quite contagious." I turned to face him. In any other timeline, I would have shrunk down in my seat, deeply embarrassed to be caught laughing all by myself. But the champagne and the intoxicating taste of freedom had completely loosened my tongue. "I truly am, sir. I am currently celebrating a very overdue independence." He closed his heavy book and offered a warm smile. "First time in Paris?" "First time anywhere in my entire life," I gently corrected him. "I was a high school history teacher for 40 years. I have taught the French Revolution thousands of times. I know exactly where the Bastille fell. I know the exact streets Robespierre walked down, but I have never actually smelled the river." "Oh, you are going to absolutely love it," he said with pure enthusiasm. "Paris is a city that deeply respects history, and it respects the people who know it. By the way, my name is Julian. I am an architect. Barbara, traveler." The word spilled out of my mouth before I even had a chance to process it. Traveler. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not a grieving widow, a traveler. I really loved the way that sounded. I loved the way the word felt on my palate, melting away just like a piece of fine luxury candy. My phone buzzed aggressively again. It was a new voice memo from Robert. I put on the noise-canceling headphones the airline had kindly provided. Those wonderful, magical devices that completely block out the outside world. I hit play. "Mom, please." His voice was audibly cracking. He was actively crying. "We have no way to get home. Chloe literally snapped the heel off her shoe. It is pouring rain out here. Just unblock the card for a quick taxi ride. I swear to you I will pay you back later. Please, Mom, do not be so cruel. We are your family." I listened to the audio message twice. I analyzed his tone very carefully. There was fear, yes. There was extreme discomfort. But above all else, there was utter disbelief. He simply could not fathom that his mother, his infinite well of free resources, had firmly shut off the tap. He was calling me cruel for forcing him to solve a basic logistical problem that any fully functional adult should easily be able to handle. He called me family when it was convenient for his wallet, but he called me a cat sitter when my presence became a mild inconvenience. I pulled off the headphones and stared down at the glowing screen. I typed out my first and only response of the entire evening. "Robert, you two have your youth and your health. two precious things that money cannot ever buy. You have your giant suitcases stuffed with all your clothes. Use that brilliant ingenuity you always claim to have. A cab ride back home costs a fraction of the price of the fancy wine you were planning to order at dinner tonight. Sell something if you have to. Welcome back to the real world. I will see you in 2 weeks. P.S. Do not forget Mittens needs his medicine at 8 o'clock sharp. I hit send, and immediately after I switched my phone into airplane mode. The disconnection felt deeply physical. It felt as if an invisible heavy cable wrapped tight around my chest had finally snapped. My dinner arrived. The lobster smelled like absolute glory, completely bathed in a rich, golden cream sauce. Julian, the handsome architect, raised his glass of red wine toward me from across the narrow aisle. To Paris, Barbara. I raised my delicate crystal flute of champagne, which sparkled brightly under the dim cabin lights. To Paris, Julian, and to the Bastille, because sometimes you simply have to demolish the old prison before you can build something brand new. I ate with an incredibly voracious appetite. Every single bite felt like a beautiful tribute to my brand new life. I thought about Robert and Chloe, soaked to the bone in the cold rain, probably waiting at a public bus stop, or calling a random friend to ask for a highly embarrassing favor. They were undoubtedly furious. Tomorrow they would surely talk terribly about me to the rest of the extended family. They would tell everyone that I went completely crazy, that I was just a bitter, hateful old hag. Let them say whatever they want to say. History is always written by the victors, and in this exact moment the victor was flying at 600 miles per hour, sitting comfortably in business class, heading straight for the City of Light. I finished my incredible meal and reclined my seat until it converted into a fully flat bed. The sweet flight attendant brought me a plush duvet and a soft feather pillow. I slipped off my orthopedic walking shoes and stretched out my toes. I closed my eyes, but not to sleep. I closed them to visualize my grand arrival. I pictured myself stepping off the aircraft, breathing in the crisp, cool air of France. I saw myself hailing a taxi, completely alone, with nobody barking orders at me, and giving the driver my hotel address using the rusty French I had picked up from old textbooks. Hotel Regina, please. I smiled in the darkness of the cabin. Robert was actually right about one thing. This was going to be an unforgettable trip, but he was completely wrong about the main character. This was not his grand vacation. It never was. The massive plane gave a tiny shake as we hit a pocket of turbulence, but I did not feel an ounce of fear. I felt cradled. For the very first time in decades, I did not have to worry if someone's shirt was properly ironed or if there were enough leftovers in the refrigerator. I only had to worry about myself. And that deep personal responsibility, which used to absolutely terrify me, now felt like the greatest gift life could have possibly handed me. Tomorrow I was going to buy brand new clothes. Tomorrow I was going to see the Eiffel Tower in person. Tomorrow, Barbara was finally going to start living. But first, I was going to sleep for 8 solid hours. No annoying interruptions. No cats loudly meowing at the door. And absolutely no ungrateful children demanding a piece of my soul. Good night, world. Good morning, freedom. The air in Paris did not smell like expensive perfume, like I had always imagined. It smelled like fresh rain on ancient cobblestone streets and warm, freshly baked bread. It was an incredibly honest aroma that filled my lungs the second I stepped out of the cab in front of the Hotel Regina. The driver, an older gentleman with a thick gray mustache who barely spoke a word of English, opened my door with a polite bow, a bow that Robert had not even offered me on his own wedding day. "Welcome, madame," he said warmly, helping me out of the car with care, but not treating me as if I were made of fragile glass. Madame. Not grandma, not old lady, not senior citizen. Madame. I straightened out my camel coat. It was literally the only physical possession I had left, besides my purse and my newly recovered dignity. I walked right into the hotel lobby with a firm, heavy step. Huge crystal chandeliers sparkled beautifully over the polished marble floors. For a brief second, the old ghost of the insecure Barbara, the one who was deeply afraid of not knowing how to behave in such a fancy place, tried to peek its head out, but I immediately chased it away by tapping the black credit card sitting right in my pocket. I was paying for this. I belonged here. The front desk clerk, a flawlessly dressed young man, did not even blink when he saw me arriving without a single piece of luggage. On the contrary, when I calmly explained to him that the airline had experienced a massive logistical issue with my bags, he immediately offered me a complimentary luxury toiletry kit and a glass of expensive wine. I took the elevator up to my room. It was absolutely gorgeous. It featured heavy velvet curtains and a large window overlooking the beautiful gardens. I stepped up to the glass. Right out there was the exact city I had taught about in my classrooms for 40 years. The city of lights, the city of revolutions, the city of absolute freedom. And I was standing right in the center of it all, completely alone without a pair of pajamas to my name, but with my soul feeling fuller than it ever had in my entire life. I sat down on the edge of the massive king-size bed and pulled out my smartphone. It was finally time to face the harsh reality I had left behind across the ocean, but this time it was going to be strictly on my own terms. I had 3 brand new text messages from Robert. There was no more yelling. There were no more childish demands. His tone had shifted radically, much like the tone of a rebellious student the exact second they realize the principal has just walked into the room. "Mom, we finally made it back to the house. We had to ask the neighbor to loan us $50 to pay the cab driver. It was so incredibly embarrassing. Chloe is really upset, but I think we both finally understand your point. Are you okay? Please let us know when you land safely. We are genuinely worried about you." I did not feel any vengeful satisfaction reading that. I just felt a deep, unwavering calm. The lesson had finally sunk in. They had to ask someone for a loan. They had to feel the sting of public shame. They had to solve a major problem without me holding their hands. I replied to them with a quick voice memo, just so they could hear my firm, steady voice. No trembling at all. Robert, Chloe. I'm all settled into my hotel room, looking out at the Eiffel Tower in the distance. I am perfectly fine. I am very glad you both made it back home safely. You now have 2 full weeks to seriously reflect on how we are going to coexist when I get back, because things are going to change drastically. Oh, and do not forget to clean out the litter boxes. Hugs. I locked my screen. I did not wait around to read their reply. My attention no longer belonged to them. The very next morning, I woke up with one clear mission in mind. I desperately needed clothes. All my sensible dresses, my comfortable loafers, and my boring old lady blouses were currently being held hostage back home, probably sitting right in the trunk of my son's car. I went downstairs to enjoy a warm, flaky croissant that literally melted in my mouth, paired with a very strong black coffee. Then I hit the streets. I walked straight to the high-end department stores. Walking inside was like stepping into a sacred temple. But instead of religious statues, there were beautiful mannequins draped in fine silks and expensive wools. A sharply dressed saleswoman approached me. In another timeline, I would have immediately darted toward the clearance racks to look for age-appropriate clothing. Those dull gray and beige items specifically designed to make older women totally invisible to the world. But not today. "I am looking for a dress," I told her, pointing straight at a display window. "And I do not want it in gray. I want it in blue. Royal blue." I tried on outfits that Chloe would have aggressively claimed were far too ridiculous for a woman my age. A bold, geometric silk scarf, some incredibly soft leather shoes with a modest yet stylish heel, a vibrant red winter coat. As I stared at myself in the fitting room mirror, I saw a woman I barely even recognized. I had deep wrinkles. Yes, I did. I had snow-white hair. Absolutely. but my eyes were sparkling with a mischievous, youthful fire. I bought every single piece. I swiped my heavy black card without a single ounce of guilt, fully knowing that every single dollar I spent was a dollar that would not be wasted on anyone else's childish whims. I walked out of the store proudly carrying my own shopping bags, feeling the absolutely delicious weight of my own personal choices. I strolled down toward the river. I sat on a sturdy wooden bench right by the grayish water, quietly watching the tourist boats drift by. The crisp, cool wind brought a natural blush to my cheeks. A young woman, probably right around Chloe's age, sat down next to me and opened a book. She smiled brightly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she asked in French. I nodded, pulling from my deep memories of old literature textbooks, and replied, "Yes, it is truly magnificent." We started chatting away, mixing broken English, random hand gestures, and a lot of laughter. Her name was Sophie. I gave her the short version of my story. I told her it was my very first time in Paris, and that I had just escaped from a tiny life that had become far too small for me. She laughed warmly and told me I seemed like an incredibly brave woman. Brave. I repeated the word out loud, truly savoring its flavor. I was not always brave, sweetie. Sometimes bravery is simply the only thing you have left when they try to strip everything else away from you. Later that afternoon, I finally went up the Eiffel Tower. I did not stand in the miserable line for the stairs. I paid top dollar for the elevator ride straight to the summit. As the sprawling city grew smaller and smaller beneath my feet, I thought about my late husband. He had worked so hard to save up this money for us, for our golden years. I had always convinced myself that spending it all by myself would be a terrible betrayal of his memory. But looking out at that infinite horizon, I finally understood the truth. He did not pinch pennies his whole life just so I could end up being our son's unpaid servant. He saved it so I could be free. "Look at this, my love," I whispered into the cold wind. "We finally made it." I felt an absolute, profound peace. The toxic motherly guilt, the heavy chain that had tied me down for years, completely dissolved up there in the high altitude. Robert and Chloe were grown adults. If they stumbled and fell, they would just have to figure out how to stand back up on their own 2 feet. I was no longer their permanent safety net. I was Barbara, the dedicated history teacher who was finally stepping out to live her own history. The next few days were an absolute whirlwind of stunning museums, cozy corner cafes, and incredibly long walks. I learned how to navigate the subway system like a local. I got lost twice, and I found myself 3 times. I ate strong-smelling artisan cheeses and drank fancy wine right in the middle of the afternoon. On the final night before my flight back home, I sat down in the hotel restaurant for my last dinner. I requested a table for one, right by the large window. I pulled out my trusty notepad. Throughout the entire trip, I had not been keeping a travel journal. I had been busy writing up a brand new life plan. Rule number 1, the house. It is far too big for just me. I am going to sell it. I will buy a small, easy-to-clean condo right near the cultural center that offers those oil painting classes I always wanted to take. Rule number 2, the money. Whatever is left over from the house sale, combined with my savings, will become a completely untouchable travel fund. Robert will just have to figure out how to survive on his own actual salary. Rule number 3, the boundaries. If they want to see me, it will be strictly by invitation only. No more free laundry service. No more endless, unreturned loans. I read over my list and smiled widely. It was my brand new constitution. My very own personal declaration of independence. The waiter brought the check to my table, and alongside it he placed a tiny, elegant box of chocolates. Compliments of the house, Madame Barbara. It has been an absolute pleasure having you here with us. Your vibrant energy is truly inspiring. I thanked him warmly with a very generous tip. I stepped outside onto the street to look up at the Eiffel Tower, fully illuminated, one last time. Its light sparkled like a million diamonds scattered across the pitch-black sky. I thought about the exact moment my flight would touch down back home. I knew Robert and Chloe would be standing right there in the arrivals terminal. They would probably be holding cheap grocery store flowers, desperately trying to patch things up, or maybe they would be standing there with long faces, fully expecting an apology from me. It honestly did not matter anymore. The woman stepping off that plane was not going to be the same woman who took off. The old Barbara, the one who babysat cats and constantly apologized for her mere existence, had been permanently left behind in Terminal 2, fading away like a puff of smoke. The new woman flying back was wearing a bright red coat. She knew exactly how to order fine wine in French, and she was absolutely certain that her real, true life was only just beginning its very first chapter. I caught my reflection in the dark glass of a closed boutique. I winked at myself. "Well done, teacher," I whispered. "Class dismissed." I turned on my heel and walked back toward my hotel. I moved with the firm, confident steps of a woman who knows that, from this day forward, the only heavy luggage she will ever carry again are her own big dreams. The trip to Paris had finally ended, but Barbara's real journey had only just begun.